Commander Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Titan's Reach, his hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the holographic display before him. The map showed a galaxy in chaos. Red markers indicated contested systems, orange ones showed refugee camps, and gray zones marked territories that had simply gone dark. The Vrel sovereignty, once considered the most powerful military force in known space, had crumbled in less than a standard year. The Cathara swarm had swept through 3 major sectors, consuming everything in its path with a hunger that seemed almost sentient in its precision. Lieutenant Amy Foster approached from the communications station, her expression grim. She carried a data pad that glowed with urgent priority markers. Jack had served with her for 6 years, long enough to recognize when she was delivering bad news. "Commander, we're receiving another distress call from the Galactic Council," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the message. "They're requesting immediate military assistance. The Cathara have broken through the Vrel defensive line at Sector 7 and are moving toward the core worlds. Civilian casualties are estimated in the billions." Jack took the pad and scanned the contents. The message was desperate, almost pleading. The Council had spent decades treating humanity as primitive isolationists, barely worthy of contact beyond trade agreements and territorial boundaries. Now they were begging for help. The irony wasn't lost on him, but he felt no satisfaction in it. The Cathara didn't discriminate between species. If they weren't stopped, they would eventually reach Earth. "What's our current position?" Jack asked, handing the pad back. 3 days from the neutral zone boundary, sir," replied Lieutenant Kevin Price from navigation. He was young but competent, one of the best navigators in the fleet. "We can reach the Council's coordinates in 4 days at maximum thrust." Jack walked to the forward viewport, staring out at the distant stars. The Titan's Reach was a Prometheus-class warship, the newest design in humanity's relatively modest fleet. While the galaxy had spent centuries building massive armadas of conventional vessels, Earth had taken a different approach. Humans had studied warfare with an intensity that bordered on obsession, not out of aggression but out of necessity. Their history was written in conflict, and they had learned lessons that many other species had never needed to consider. "Send a response to the Council," Jack said finally. "Inform them that humanity is willing to provide assistance." "The Titan's Reach will proceed to the conflict zone immediately." Amy hesitated. "Sir, they're asking for fleet support. They expect multiple warships, carriers, support vessels. We're just one ship." "I'm aware, Lieutenant, but we're what they're getting. Earth Command has already authorized this mission. The rest of our fleet is defending the outer colonies and maintaining the deterrent network. We can't leave our own space undefended." He turned to face his crew. "Besides, one human warship might be exactly what the galaxy needs to see." The bridge fell silent for a moment. Everyone present understood what he meant. The Titan's Reach wasn't just a warship. It was a statement. It represented a philosophy of warfare that the galaxy had never encountered, built by a species that had refined the art of combat over millennia of bloody experience. 3 days later, the Titan's Reach dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the contested zone. The tactical display immediately lit up with contacts, hundreds of them. The Cathara fleet was even larger than intelligence reports had suggested. Their ships were organic-looking things, dark and twisted, like they had been grown rather than built. They moved with an eerie coordination, swarm patterns that made traditional fleet tactics almost useless. "Sensors are picking up Vrel remnant forces," reported Ensign Lisa Crawford from Tactical. "Looks like 3 damaged cruisers and maybe a dozen smaller craft. They're falling back toward the civilian evacuation corridors." "Communications, hail the Vrel commander," Jack ordered. A moment later, the holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of a Vrel officer. The species was reptilian in appearance, with scaled skin that ranged from deep green to bronze. This particular officer looked exhausted, his uniform scorched and torn. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Jack's human features. "I am Fleet Commander Sector of the Vrel Sovereignty," the alien said, his voice rough. "You are human. I was told to expect a fleet, not a single vessel." "Commander Jack Morrison of the Titan's Reach," Jack replied. We're all that Earth could spare without leaving our own territory vulnerable, but we're here to help." Sector's expression shifted between disbelief and something that might have been despair. "One ship against this." "Commander, I mean no disrespect to your courage, but the Cathara have destroyed everything we threw at them. We had 50 capital ships in this sector. 50. Now we have 3 damaged cruisers and a handful of fighters. What can one human vessel possibly accomplish?" Jack studied the tactical display, watching the Cathara swarm patterns. They were predictable once you understood them. They relied on overwhelming numbers and coordinated strikes, hitting weak points with precision. It was effective against conventional fleets that fought in formation, but it left them vulnerable to unconventional tactics. "Fleet Commander, I need you to continue your evacuation operations. Get those civilian ships to safety. We'll handle the Cathara." "Handle them." "Commander Morrison, there are over 300 Cathara vessels in this sector alone. Your sensors must be malfunctioning if you believe you can face those numbers." "Our sensors work fine, Fleet Commander. Just get your people to safety. We'll buy you the time you need." Jack cut the transmission before Sector could protest further. Amy approached him with a raised eyebrow. "Sir, he has a point. 300 ships is a lot even for us." "True, but the Cathara have never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. That gives us an advantage." Jack moved to the command chair and activated the ship-wide intercom. "All hands, this is the commander. We're about to engage a superior force. I won't lie to you, the odds look bad on paper, but remember your training. Remember why we're here. The Cathara think they can consume the galaxy without consequence. Let's show them what happens when they encounter humanity." Battle stations. The bridge transformed as his crew moved with practiced efficiency. Consoles came alive with tactical data. Weapon systems powered up with a deep thrumming that resonated through the ship's hull. The Titan's reach was built for this, designed around principles that the galaxy had never fully embraced. Humans had learned long ago that technology alone didn't win wars. You needed strategy, adaptability, and the will to do what was necessary. "The Cathara are changing formation," Lisa reported. "They've detected us. Looks like they're diverting about 60 ships to intercept." "Good. That's 60 fewer harassing the evacuation fleet." Jack studied the enemy formation. They were moving in a classic swarm pattern, trying to surround and overwhelm. It worked against static defenders, but the Titan's reach wasn't going to sit still. "Navigation, plot an attack vector that takes us through their formation. Maximum speed. Weapons, I want targeted strikes on their command nodes. The big ones coordinating the smaller craft." "Aye, sir," Kevin responded, his fingers dancing across his console. "Vector plotted. We'll punch right through their center." The Titan's reach surged forward, its engines burning with barely contained power. The Cathara vessels moved to intercept, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that might have been communication. They opened fire first, unleashing streams of plasma and bio-acid projectiles that tore through space. The human warship's shields flared as impacts registered, but they held. Human shield technology was layered and redundant, designed to absorb and dissipate energy in ways that made conventional shields look primitive. "Return fire," Jack ordered calmly. The Titan's reach carried weapons that would have seemed impossible to other species. Railguns that could accelerate projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. Directed energy weapons with focusing crystals grown in zero gravity. Missile systems with warheads that could be configured for different types of targets. But the real advantage was the fire control system. Human computers could process tactical data and execute firing solutions faster than any organic mind, and they had been programmed by a species that understood war at a fundamental level. The first volley from the Titan's reach was devastating. 3 Cathara command ships exploded simultaneously, their coordination nodes severed. The smaller craft around them faltered, their swarm patterns disrupted. Jack watched as confusion rippled through the enemy formation. They had expected a conventional engagement, a slugfest where numbers would eventually tell. They weren't prepared for precision strikes that eliminated key targets in seconds. "Keep moving," Jack commanded. "Don't let them regroup. Navigation, evasive pattern delta. weapons, free fire on targets of opportunity. The Titan's reach danced through space like a predator among prey. It accelerated, decelerated, changed vectors with a grace that belied its size. The Cathara tried to surround it, but they were always a step behind. Human naval doctrine emphasized mobility and firepower over armor and mass. It was a philosophy born from centuries of naval warfare on Earth's oceans, adapted and refined for the vacuum of space. Another volley. 5 more Cathara ships died, their hulls torn apart by railgun slugs traveling at incredible velocities. The human warship's weapons never seemed to miss, each shot calculated to hit vital systems. It wasn't just raw firepower, it was the application of force with surgical precision. "Sir, the Cathara are pulling back," Lisa reported, surprise evident in her voice. "They're regrouping at maximum weapons range," Jack nodded. The Cathara were intelligent. They had realized that their standard tactics weren't working and were adapting. That was good. It meant they were thinking defensively, which meant they were no longer focused solely on the evacuation fleet. "Status report," he requested. "Shields at 72%, Amy read from her console. "Minor damage to the port armor plating. All weapon systems operational. We've eliminated 14 enemy vessels with another 6 showing critical damage. And the Vrel evacuation. On schedule." Fleet Commander Sector reports that civilian transports are nearly clear of the combat zone. "Good, now let's finish this." Jack leaned forward in his command chair. "The Cathara are regrouping because they're trying to develop a counter-strategy. We won't give them the time. Navigation, plot a course directly at their new formation. Maximum thrust." "Sir, they'll be ready for us this time," Kevin warned. "I'm counting on it. Weapons, prepare the Nova torpedoes. I want a full-spread, sequential detonation pattern." A ripple of tension moved through the bridge. Nova torpedoes were humanity's answer to swarm tactics. Each warhead contained a miniaturized fusion reactor that could be triggered remotely. When detonated in sequence, they created a cascade effect, a wave of plasma and radiation that could sweep clean an entire volume of space. It was a weapon that the galaxy considered excessively destructive, which was precisely why the Cathara wouldn't be expecting it. The Titan's reach accelerated toward the enemy formation. The Cathara opened fire when they entered range, but this time Jack didn't order evasive maneuvers. The ship plowed straight ahead, shields absorbing punishment while its own weapons maintained a steady barrage. It was a calculated risk, trading shield strength for positioning. "Torpedoes away," Lisa announced. 20 missiles streaked from the Titan's reach, their drives burning bright against the darkness of space. The Cathara tried to intercept them with point defense fire, but the torpedoes were too fast, too maneuverable. They penetrated deep into the enemy formation before Jack gave the detonation command. Space itself seemed to ignite. 20 miniature suns bloomed in sequence, each explosion triggering the next in a carefully choreographed dance of destruction. The Cathara ships caught in the blast wave simply ceased to exist, their organic hulls unable to withstand the thermal and kinetic forces unleashed upon them. Those on the periphery were battered and burned, their coordination shattered. When the light faded, over half the Cathara force was gone. The survivors were scattered, disorganized, no longer the precise swarm that had terrorized the galaxy. They began to retreat, their formation breaking apart as individual ships fled toward deeper space. "Sir, should we pursue?" Amy asked. Jack shook his head. "No, our objective was to protect the evacuation, not hunt down every Cathara ship in the sector. Let them run. Let them tell the rest of their swarm what happened here." The bridge crew began to relax as the tactical display confirmed the Cathara were indeed fleeing the system. It had been a short engagement by most standards, less than an hour from first contact to enemy retreat. But in that hour, a single human warship had accomplished what dozens of Vrel vessels could not. Fleet Commander Sector's face appeared on the holographic display again. This time, his expression was one of pure astonishment. "Commander Morrison, I witnessed the engagement from my sensor feeds. That was extraordinary. Your tactics, your weapons, the precision of your crew. I have never seen anything like it. How is this possible? Your species has barely been space-faring for 2 centuries. Jack allowed himself a small smile. Fleet Commander, humanity has been at war with itself for thousands of years. We've fought over territory, resources, ideology, and sometimes for reasons we can barely remember. We've destroyed ourselves and rebuilt countless times. Every weapon system on this ship, every tactical doctrine we employ, represents lessons learned in blood. When you've spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare, 2 centuries in space is more than enough time to apply that knowledge. Sector was silent for a moment, processing this information. Then the galaxy owes humanity a debt. The Cathara would have overrun this sector within days. Millions would have died. Your intervention has saved countless lives. We did what was necessary, Jack replied. But this was just one battle, Fleet Commander. The Cathara are still out there and they won't stop until they're forced to. The galaxy needs to understand that. What do you propose? A coordinated response. The Vrel, the Council races, and humanity working together. We can share our tactical knowledge, help upgrade your defensive capabilities. But more importantly, we need to take the fight to the Cathara. Show them that the galaxy isn't prey to be consumed at their leisure. Sector's eyes gleamed with something that might have been hope. I will relay your words to the Galactic Council. After what I have witnessed today, I believe they will listen. Commander Morrison, you have changed the course of this war. As the transmission ended, Amy stepped closer to Jack's chair. Do you really think the Council will cooperate? They've been pretty dismissive of humanity in the past. They will now, Jack said quietly, because they've seen what one human warship can accomplish. They've seen that we don't just have better weapons, we have better strategies, better training, better understanding of how war actually works. That's not something they can ignore anymore. Kevin spoke up from navigation. Sir, we're receiving multiple transmissions from other sectors. Word of the engagement is spreading fast. Several Council worlds are requesting human assistance. Jack nodded slowly. This was the beginning of something larger. Humanity had remained isolated for so long, focusing on their own development while the galaxy went about its business. But the Cathara threat had changed the equation. Now Earth had a choice. Continue their isolation and hope the threat never reached them, or step onto the galactic stage as a military power. Send a message to Earth Command, Jack ordered. Inform them of our success and recommend immediate deployment of additional forces to key sectors. Also suggest opening formal military cooperation talks with the Galactic Council. It's time humanity showed the galaxy what we're really capable of. Over the following weeks, the impact of that single engagement rippled across known space. The Cathara, accustomed to easy victories, suddenly found themselves facing organized resistance. Human advisors were deployed to Council fleets, bringing with them tactical innovations and training protocols. Weapons technology was shared, carefully and selectively, enough to give the other species a fighting chance. But the real change was psychological. The galaxy had lived in fear of the Cathara swarm, believing them to be an unstoppable force of nature. The Titan's reach had proven that wrong. They were just another enemy, dangerous but not invincible. And if one human warship could defeat 60 Cathara vessels, what could a coordinated galactic response accomplish? Jack stood in the observation deck of a Council space station, looking out at the assembled fleet. Human ships flew alongside Vrel cruisers, their crews training together, learning from each other. It was a sight he had never expected to see in his lifetime. Humanity had finally found its place in the galaxy, not as conquerors or victims, but as warriors who understood the true nature of conflict and were willing to share that knowledge. Ambassador Rachel Stone approached him, her diplomatic robes pristine despite the informal setting. She had been appointed as humanity's liaison to the Council, a position that had gained significant importance in recent weeks. The Council is voting on your proposal tomorrow. They're going to approve it, Commander, a joint military command with human officers in key strategic positions. 6 months ago, they wouldn't have even considered it. 6 months ago, they didn't think they needed us, Jack replied. The Cathara taught them otherwise. Sometimes that's what it takes to break through prejudice and pride. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. There are some on Earth who worry we're getting too involved, that we're taking on responsibilities that aren't ours. I understand their concern, But the Cathara won't stop at the core worlds. Eventually, they'll push into our territory. Better to fight them here, alongside allies, than alone in our own systems. Jack turned to face her. Besides, the galaxy needs to see what humanity represents, not just our weapons or tactics, but our values. We fight not for conquest or glory, but because some things are worth defending. A young ensign approached with a data pad. Commander Morrison, Admiral Grant wishes to speak with you. Priority channel. Jack took the pad and activated the secure link. Admiral Helen Grant's stern features appeared on the screen. She was the highest-ranking officer in Earth's space forces, a veteran of the colony wars who had shaped modern human naval doctrine. Commander Morrison, I've reviewed your after-action reports from the Sector 7 engagement. Impressive work. You and your crew performed exactly as we hoped. Thank you, Admiral. The Titan's Reach is a fine ship with an excellent crew. Indeed, which is why I'm promoting you to captain and giving you command of the First Contact Fleet. 12 ships, mixed human and council vessels, with a mandate to engage Cathara forces wherever they're found. You'll coordinate with council military leadership, but tactical decisions are yours. Jack felt the weight of the responsibility settling on his shoulders. Admiral, that's a significant force. Are you sure Earth Command wants to commit that many resources? Captain Morrison, you proved something important in that engagement. You showed that humanity doesn't just have superior technology, we have superior doctrine. The galaxy is watching us now, and they're ready to follow our lead. This is our moment to shape the future of galactic security. Don't waste it. The transmission ended, leaving Jack staring at the fleet assembled before him, 12 ships. In galactic terms, it was a modest force, but 12 ships led by human officers employing human tactics supported by council resources. That was enough to change the strategic equation. Amy found him an hour later, still standing in the observation deck. Captain, congratulations on the promotion. The crew is excited about the new assignment. Are they ready for it? This won't be a single engagement. We'll be in combat situations for months, maybe years. The Cathara won't give up easily. They're ready, sir. Every member of this crew volunteered for frontline service. They know what they signed up for. She paused. Besides, word has spread about what we accomplished. Every human ship in the fleet is volunteering for the task force. They want to be part of this. Jack smiled at that. It was a very human response, this desire to be part of something larger. Throughout their history, humans had shown a remarkable capacity for sacrifice when they believed in a cause. That was another lesson the galaxy was learning. Humanity didn't just fight well, they fought for something more than survival. The First Contact Fleet deployed 3 weeks later. Jack stood on the bridge of the Titan's Reach, now the flagship of a force that represented everything humanity had learned about warfare. Around them, the other ships of the fleet took formation, a mix of human warships and retrofitted council vessels. It was an imperfect alliance, born of necessity rather than long friendship, but it was a start. Their first major engagement came sooner than expected. Intelligence reported a massive Cathara concentration in the Tarsis system, a strategic location that controlled access to 3 major trade routes. If the Cathara secured it, they could split the Council's territory in half and isolate entire sectors. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. The tactical display showed the grim reality: over 500 Cathara ships, organized into multiple swarm formations. It was the largest concentration of enemy forces anyone had seen. Captain, we're receiving transmissions from the Council ships, Amy reported. They're requesting orders. Jack studied the display carefully. The Cathara had positioned themselves well, covering all the obvious approach vectors. They had learned from their previous encounters and were no longer relying solely on swarm tactics. This would be a real battle, the kind that would test everything they had worked for. Open a channel to all ships, he commanded. When Amy signaled that he was connected, Jack began to speak. This is Captain Morrison to all fleet units. What we face today is significant but not insurmountable. The Cathara expect us to charge in recklessly or to be intimidated by their numbers. We're going to do neither. We're going to fight smart, the way humans have always fought when facing superior numbers. We're going to use precision, coordination, and the tactical knowledge that our species has paid for in blood over thousands of years. Trust your training, trust your commanders, and trust the person standing next to you. Today, we show the galaxy that the Cathara are not inevitable. Today, we fight back. The battle that followed would be remembered in galactic history as the turning point in the war. The first contact fleet didn't simply engage the Cathara, they systematically dismantled their formations. Human tactics, applied with Council firepower and resources, proved devastatingly effective. The Cathara had never encountered an enemy that could anticipate their movements, that could turn their own coordination against them. When the battle ended 8 hours later, the Cathara had lost over 300 ships. The first contact fleet had suffered casualties too, 5 ships heavily damaged and 1 destroyed, but they had held the line. The Tarsi system remained under Council control, and more importantly, the Cathara had learned that they could be beaten. In the aftermath, as the fleet conducted rescue operations and damage assessment, Jack received a transmission from the Galactic Council. Council chairman, an elderly member of the Zell species, appeared on his screen. The Zell were known for their longevity and wisdom, and this particular individual had served the Council for nearly 2 centuries. Captain Morrison, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I extend our deepest gratitude. Your fleet has achieved what many believed impossible. The Cathara are retreating across multiple sectors. Their offensive has stalled. We did what needed to be done, Chairman, but this war isn't over. The Cathara will adapt, they always do. We need to maintain pressure, continue developing new tactics. I agree, which is why the Council has voted to formalize the military alliance with humanity. We are establishing a joint command structure, with human officers taking leadership roles in strategic planning and tactical operations. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that the galaxy desperately needs. Jack felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in what humanity had accomplished, concern about the responsibilities they were accepting, and hope that this might lead to a lasting peace once the Cathara threat was contained. Chairman, humanity is honored by this trust. We won't let the galaxy down. I have no doubt, Captain. Your species has a saying, I believe. Something about answering the call when help is needed. Today, the galaxy called for help. Humanity answered with a single warship. But that single warship showed us that victory was possible. That is a lesson we will not forget. As the transmission ended, Jack turned to look at his bridge crew. They were exhausted from the battle, but there was something else in their expressions now. Purpose, pride, the knowledge that they were part of something that would echo through history. One ship had made the difference, had shown the galaxy that the Cathara could be defeated. Now it was up to humanity and their new allies to finish what they had started. The war would continue for many months. There would be victories and defeats, moments of triumph and tragedy. But the tide had turned in that first engagement, when the Titan's Reach arrived at a desperate call for help, and proved that one determined ship, crewed by humans who understood the true cost and necessity of warfare, could change the course of history. 3 months after the Battle of Tarsis, Jack found himself addressing a gathering of military commanders from across the galaxy. The conference room aboard the Council flagship was filled with representatives from dozens of species, each bringing their own perspectives on warfare and strategy. The Vrel were there, along with the insectoid Churek, the aquatic Delphinians, and representatives from a dozen other civilizations. The Cathara operate on biological imperatives, Jack explained, gesturing to the holographic display that showed swarm patterns and attack vectors. They're not driven by politics or ideology. They consume resources to support their population growth, and that growth is exponential. Every world they take provides them with material to produce more ships, more warriors. That's why conventional containment strategies have failed. You can't negotiate with them, and you can't simply defend static positions. A Churek commander, her chitinous plates gleaming under the conference room lights, clicked her mandibles in what Jack had learned was a sign of concern. Then how do we stop them? If they can continue to grow and adapt, eventually they will overwhelm any defense we establish. We have to cut off their supply lines, Jack replied. The Cathara have several key nursery worlds where they breed and construct new vessels. Intelligence has identified at least 5 such locations. If we can destroy or neutralize these facilities, we severely limit their ability to replace losses. It won't end the war, but it will change the strategic equation dramatically. Fleet Commander Sector, who had been promoted to Joint Command after the Sector 7 engagement, leaned forward. Such an operation would require striking deep into Cathara-controlled space. The casualties could be substantial. Yes, Jack agreed. But if we continue fighting defensively, the casualties will be far worse in the long run. The Cathara are learning from each engagement. They're adapting their tactics. We've bought ourselves time, but that time is finite. We need to take decisive action while we still have the initiative. The room fell silent as the commanders considered his words. Jack knew what he was proposing was dangerous. Offensive operations into enemy territory always carried risks, but throughout human history, wars were rarely won by passive defense alone. Eventually, you had to take the fight to the enemy, force them to react to your moves rather than the other way around. Ambassador Stone spoke up from her position near the back of the room. The Council is prepared to authorize such an operation, but they want assurances that the risks are manageable. Captain Morrison, what would you need to make this work? Jack pulled up a new set of tactical displays. We'd need a multi-pronged assault. Hit at least 3 of the 5 nursery worlds simultaneously. That prevents the Cathara from concentrating their defense and ensures that even if 1 or 2 strikes fail, we still achieve strategic impact. Each strike force would need to be mobile, heavily armed, and capable of sustained combat without resupply. I'm proposing modified versions of the first contact fleet for each target, with human tactical officers integrated throughout the command structure. You're asking for a significant portion of our combined fleet, noted a Delphinian admiral, his translator rendering his aquatic vocalizations into standard Galactic. If this operation fails, we could lose our offensive capability entirely. That's true, Jack acknowledged. But if we don't try, we're accepting a slow war of attrition that the Cathara are better equipped to win. They can replace their losses faster than we can. The only way to change that equation is to eliminate their production capability. Sector's claws drummed against the conference table, a gesture Jack had learned indicated deep thought. The human approach to warfare is remarkably aggressive. You speak of taking risks that most species would consider unacceptable. Risk is relative, Jack replied. Humans learned long ago that sometimes the greatest risk is inaction. Yes, this operation is dangerous. Yes, we could suffer heavy losses, but consider the alternative. How many worlds will the Cathara consume if we give them another year? How many billions of lives will be lost? When you frame it that way, the risks of offensive action become more acceptable. The debate continued for hours, but eventually the decision was made. 3 strike forces would be assembled, each targeting a different Cathara nursery world. Jack would command the primary force, targeting the largest known facility. Sector would lead the second force, and a veteran Churic commander named Kellex would lead the third. The operation was code-named Deep Strike, and it was scheduled to commence in 6 weeks. The preparation period was intense. Ships were refitted with additional armor and weapons. Crews drilled constantly on coordinated attack patterns and emergency procedures. Jack spent countless hours reviewing intelligence data, studying Cathara defensive capabilities, and refining the attack plan. Every detail mattered. A single mistake could cost thousands of lives. Amy found him in his quarters 2 days before the operation was scheduled to begin. He was reviewing tactical simulations for what felt like the 100th time. She knocked politely before entering, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this, Captain. You've been at it for 12 hours straight." Jack accepted the cup gratefully. "Thanks. I'm trying to anticipate every possible complication. The Cathara aren't stupid. They'll have defenses around these facilities probably stronger than anything we've encountered so far. The crew has confidence in you, sir. We've trained hard. Everyone knows their role." Amy sat down across from him. "But I have to ask, do you think we're ready for this? It's different from anything we've done before." Jack considered the question carefully. "Honestly, I don't think anyone can truly be ready for this kind of operation. There are too many variables, too many unknowns, but we're as prepared as we can be. We have good people, good ships, and a solid plan. Sometimes that has to be enough. The other species are watching us closely. Some of them still aren't sure about human leadership. They respect what we've accomplished, but they're nervous about our aggressive tactics. I know, but here's what they need to understand. Humanity didn't become good at warfare because we're naturally violent or aggressive. We became good at it because we had to. Our history is filled with existential conflicts where defeat meant extinction. That's taught us something the galaxy is still learning. Sometimes, you have to be willing to risk everything to protect what matters. Jack set down his coffee cup. The Cathara are an existential threat. If we don't stop them now while we have momentum and resources, they'll eventually overwhelm us all. That's not speculation, it's mathematics. Amy nodded slowly. Then let's make sure Deep Strike succeeds, for Earth and for the galaxy. The strike forces departed on schedule, each taking a different route through the contested zones to avoid alerting the Cathara to the coordinated nature of the assault. Jack's force consisted of 28 ships, a mix of human warships and retrofitted council vessels. It was the largest force he had commanded, and the responsibility weighed heavily on him. The journey took 10 days of hard travel through dangerous space. They encountered Cathara patrols twice, but managed to avoid detection through careful navigation and the use of advanced stealth systems. Human sensor technology had proven superior to most galactic standards, and it gave them an edge in avoiding unwanted encounters. On the 11th day, they arrived at the edge of the target system. The nursery world was a massive planet with a thick, toxic atmosphere. Orbital facilities ringed the planet like a metallic necklace, and the sensor readings showed hundreds of Cathara ships in various stages of construction. It was exactly what intelligence had predicted, but seeing it in person was still sobering. Defensive fleet detected, Lisa reported from Tactical. I'm counting at least 200 Cathara vessels, combat ready. They're positioned in a layered defense pattern around the orbital facilities. Jack studied the tactical display. The Cathara had learned from their previous encounters. Their defensive positioning was more sophisticated, covering multiple approach vectors and providing mutual support between units. This wouldn't be the simple swarm tactics they had first encountered. Signal all ships. We're commencing the attack as planned. First wave focuses on the outer defensive perimeter. Once we create an opening, second wave pushes through to target the orbital facilities. Third wave provides cover and deals with any reinforcements. Jack paused, letting his orders sink in. Remember, our objective is the production facilities, not ship kills. We hit the targets and extract. No heroics. The fleet split into its designated formations and began the approach. The Cathara detected them almost immediately and began repositioning their forces. Jack watched the enemy movements carefully, looking for patterns, weaknesses. There. The right flank was slightly overextended, and the coverage between defensive layers had a gap that could be exploited. Navigation, adjust our approach vector. I want to hit that gap in their coverage. He transmitted the updated coordinates to the rest of the fleet. The human ships acknowledged immediately, while the council vessels took a few extra seconds to confirm. That slight delay in response time was something they were still working on, but it was improving with each operation. The first contact came at extreme range. The Cathara opened fire with their bioplasma weapons, streams of superheated matter that could melt through conventional armor. The fleet's shields absorbed the initial barrage, and then they were in range to return fire. The human railguns spoke first, their kinetic projectiles crossing the distance in seconds. 3 Cathara ships exploded, their organic hulls unable to withstand the kinetic impact. The battle intensified rapidly. The Cathara defenders fought with desperate fury, understanding that the production facilities behind them were critical to their species' survival. They threw ship after ship at the advancing fleet, willing to accept tremendous casualties to slow the attack. But the combined force had momentum and superior coordination. Human tactical doctrine emphasized maintaining initiative, keeping the enemy reactive rather than proactive. First wave has breached the outer perimeter, Amy reported. Second wave is advancing on the orbital facilities. Heavy resistance expected. Jack monitored multiple displays simultaneously, tracking the progress of each element of his force. The Council ships were performing well, their crews having absorbed human training and doctrine. They moved with more confidence now, less reliant on rigid formations and more willing to adapt to changing circumstances. The second wave reached the orbital facilities and began their attack runs. These structures were massive, kilometers in length, biological factories where K-Thara ships were grown and equipped. Destroying them would set back the enemy's production capability by months, possibly years. The fleet concentrated their fire, targeting structural weak points identified by intelligence. The first facility began to break apart under sustained bombardment. Secondary explosions rippled along its length as internal systems failed catastrophically. Jack felt no satisfaction in the destruction, only a grim determination to see the mission through. War was never something to celebrate, even when necessary. "Captain, we're detecting K-Thara reinforcements," Lisa called out urgently. "Multiple faster-than-light transitions at the system's edge. I count at least 50 ships, possibly more." This was the critical moment Jack had anticipated. The K-Thara would send reinforcements, trying to trap the attacking fleet against the orbital defenses. The question was whether they could complete their objectives and extract before being overwhelmed. Third wave moved to intercept those reinforcements. "Buy us time to finish here." 8 ships, 4 human and 4 Vrel, broke off from the main formation and accelerated toward the incoming K-Thara force. It was a desperate move, pitting 8 ships against 50, but they didn't need to win that engagement. They just needed to delay the enemy long enough for the main force to complete their mission. The second orbital facility exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The third was heavily damaged and beginning to list toward the planet below, its structural integrity compromised. One more to go. Jack watched as his ships repositioned, concentrating fire on the remaining facility. Time seemed to slow as railgun slugs and energy beams converged on the target. Third wave reports heavy contact with the reinforcements, Amy relayed. "They're taking casualties but holding position. We have approximately 8 minutes before the K-Thara force breaks through." 8 minutes. Jack did the calculations in his head. The fourth facility was more heavily armored than the others, taking longer to destroy. They needed at least 6 more minutes of sustained fire to ensure its destruction. "All ships, maximum firepower on the remaining target. I want every weapon we have concentrated on that facility." The combined fleet unleashed everything they had. The space around the orbital facility became a storm of energy and kinetic projectiles. The structure's defenses tried to respond, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of fire. Slowly, inexorably, the facility began to break apart. 6 minutes to breakthrough, Amy warned. The fourth facility finally succumbed, its central structure collapsing as critical systems failed. Jack allowed himself a moment of relief before issuing the next order. "All ships disengage and prepare for extraction. Third wave break contact and rejoin the main formation. We're leaving." The fleet began its withdrawal, fighting a running battle against the remaining K-Thara defenders. The third wave ships, battered but intact, rejoined the formation. 2 of the Vrel cruisers had suffered significant damage, and 1 human destroyer was reporting multiple system failures, but everyone was still mobile. That was what mattered. They jumped to faster-than-light speed just as the K-Thara reinforcements reached weapons range. It had been close, closer than Jack would have liked, but they had succeeded. 4 major production facilities destroyed, and the fleet mostly intact. Intelligence estimated that the K-Thara had lost months of production capacity, possibly more. News of Deep Strike's success spread rapidly through the galaxy. All 3 strike forces had achieved their objectives, though at varying costs. Sector's force had suffered heavier casualties, losing 3 ships entirely, while Kellix's force had managed a nearly flawless operation with minimal damage. Overall, the operation was considered a strategic victory, the first major offensive success against the K-Thara. Jack stood in the observation deck of the Council flagship once again, this time looking out at a fleet that had grown considerably since his first arrival. More species had joined the alliance, contributing ships and resources to the war effort. The Churuk had committed their entire military, impressed by the success of human tactics. The Delphinians had provided advanced medical technology and supply chain logistics. Even the isolationist Xyler had sent a diplomatic mission to explore cooperation. Admiral Grant's face appeared on a nearby display. "Captain Morrison, congratulations on another successful operation. Earth Command is pleased with your performance. The Council has requested that you be promoted to Admiral and given command of the entire Allied fleet structure." Jack felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. "Admiral, that's a significant expansion of authority. Are you sure the Council species will accept human leadership at that level?" "They've already voted on it, Morrison. Unanimously. You've proven that human military doctrine works, and more importantly, you've shown them how to implement it themselves. They're not just following orders anymore, they're learning to think tactically. That's the real victory here." "What about the Cathara? Deep Strike was successful, but they're still a major threat. Intelligence suggests they're pulling back to consolidate their remaining forces. We've hurt them badly, Admiral Morrison. Not enough to end the war, but enough to shift the strategic balance. For the first time since this conflict began, the Cathara are the ones on the defensive." Jack nodded slowly, processing this information. The war was far from over, but for the first time, victory seemed possible. "What are my orders, sir?" "Maintain pressure on the Cathara. Continue operations to limit their expansion and degrade their capabilities. But more importantly, continue training the Council forces. The goal isn't for humanity to fight this war for the galaxy. The goal is to teach the galaxy how to fight for itself. That's how we ensure long-term stability." The transmission ended, and Jack found himself alone with his thoughts. The journey from that first distress call to this moment had been remarkable. Humanity had gone from isolated newcomers to essential partners in galactic defense. But Grant was right about the most important lesson. Sustainable victory came not from dominating the battlefield yourself, but from teaching others how to stand and fight. Amy entered the observation deck, carrying a data pad. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from the training academies. Enrollment from Council species has increased by 300%. Everyone wants to learn human tactical doctrine now." "That's good news. Make sure we have enough qualified instructors. Quality matters more than quantity in training." "Already on it, sir. We've also received formal requests from 17 species for technology transfer agreements. They want access to our weapons systems, shield technology, and sensor arrays." Jack considered this carefully. Technology transfer was always a delicate balance. Approve the requests, but phase the transfers over time. Start with defensive systems and basic tactical computing. Once they demonstrate they can integrate and maintain those effectively, we can discuss more advanced systems. We're building partnerships here, not dependencies. The galaxy had begged for help, and humanity had answered with a single warship. But that single warship had become a symbol of something larger. The idea that any threat could be overcome with the right combination of courage, knowledge, and determination. The war with the Cathara would continue. Battles would be won and lost, but the psychological victory was already achieved. The galaxy had learned that the darkness could be pushed back, that survival was not just about hiding behind defenses, but about taking the fight to those who threatened peace and prosperity. Months turned into years. The Cathara were slowly but steadily pushed back from their conquered territories. It wasn't a swift victory. Nothing in warfare ever was, but it was progress. Human tactical officers served throughout the Allied fleet, not as conquerors but as teachers and partners. The knowledge that humanity had accumulated over millennia of conflict was being shared, adapted, and integrated into a new galactic military doctrine. Jack stood on the bridge of his flagship, now a purpose-built command vessel designed to coordinate fleet operations across multiple sectors. The Titan's Reach had been reassigned to patrol duties, its historic role honored but its crew ready for new challenges. He looked at the faces around him, human and alien working side by side with a professionalism that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Council Headquarters," Amy announced. She had been promoted to his Chief of Staff, a position that reflected the trust he placed in her judgment. "It's the Chairman, Priority 1. The Chairman's aged features appeared on the display. "Admiral Morrison, I have news. Our intelligence networks report that the Cathara are attempting to open diplomatic channels. They're requesting a ceasefire and negotiations." Jack felt a complex mix of emotions. Victory was close, but wars rarely ended with complete destruction of one side. What are the terms they're proposing? Withdrawal from all contested territories, recognition of current boundaries, exchange of prisoners. They're offering to restrict their expansion to uninhabited systems for the foreseeable future. In exchange, they want assurances that the Allied fleet won't pursue offensive operations into their core territory. It was more than Jack had expected. The Cathara were essentially admitting defeat, or at least acknowledging that continued warfare was unsustainable for them. "Chairman, I recommend accepting their proposal with verification protocols. Establish monitoring stations along the boundaries. Maintain fleet readiness in case they violate the agreement. Peace is valuable, but only when it's enforceable. The Council agrees with your assessment. We'll proceed with negotiations. Admiral, on behalf of the galactic community, I want to express our gratitude. When humanity answered our call for help, many of us were skeptical. We didn't understand what your species could offer. Now we know. You didn't just save us from the Cathara threat. You taught us how to save ourselves. That is a far greater gift." The transmission ended, and Jack turned to his bridge crew. They had worked tirelessly for years, sacrificing time with their families, enduring the stress of constant combat operations, and rising to every challenge placed before them. They deserved to know what their efforts had achieved. "All hands, this is Admiral Morrison. I want to inform you that the Cathara have requested a ceasefire and are withdrawing from contested territories. If negotiations are successful, this war may finally be coming to an end. Your courage, your skill, and your dedication have made this possible. You've not only defended the galaxy, you've shown the universe what humanity stands for. Well done, all of you." The cheers that echoed through the ship's comm system were deafening. Jack allowed himself a small smile. They had earned this moment of celebration. The war wasn't quite over yet. There would still be negotiations and monitoring and the constant vigilance required to maintain peace. But the crisis had passed. The galaxy had survived. Years later, when historians wrote about the Cathara War, they would focus on the battles, the tactics, the technological innovations. But Jack knew that the real story was simpler and more profound. The galaxy had faced an existential threat and had called for help. Humanity had answered with a single warship, not because they sought glory or power, but because it was the right thing to do. That single warship had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten, that courage and determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds. That knowledge, once shared openly and without reservation, had transformed the entire galactic community. The lessons learned in humanity's bloody history had become the foundation for a new era of cooperation and mutual defense. The galaxy had begged for help. Humans answered with a single warship. And in doing so, they had changed the course of history, not through conquest or domination, but through the simple act of standing up when others needed them most. That was the true measure of humanity's place in the cosmos, not their weapons or their tactics, but their willingness to fight for something greater than themselves.